Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our next episode in our reviewed and ranked series. Today, we will be taking a look at the next character who appears alphabetically within the base roster of Ultimate Alliance 3, and that, of course, brings us to Black Widow. Now, Black Widow is a very interesting character to talk about, and we will get into speaking about her in just a moment, but before we jump into this, make sure to check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, please take a moment to do so, as that subscription is free and easy. I bring videos to you on a daily basis, and if you happen to find this video helpful and or enjoyable, please feel free to leave a like. So Black Widow, she is an interesting character within the scope of this game. And the reason that I say this is because, well, I wouldn't necessarily fit her into the top tier of characters, but we'll get into the reasoning as to why and then give her our final ranking. So, first thing that we need to look at here is we need to be mindful of the 9 different synergies which she has, because she is an integral part of a lot of different teams, which is why she has so many synergies. In the Mastery category, she has synergies with Femme Fatales, Agile Fighters, and Sharpshooters. In the Energy category, she has synergies with Avengers, Women of Marvel, and Partners. In the Vitality section, she has synergies with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And in the Resilience synergy, she has the synergies with Webbed Warriors and Back in Black. And that is quite a wide variety of synergies that she has available and can bring to the team, which does allow her to fill out the roster of your team as you're putting them together decently well because of the amount of synergies that she has access to. And that is kind of interesting in its own right. You'll notice here from her main profile page that one of her hero traits is the Element Shock trait, and that simply means that she does have attacks that will add the electric or the shock attribute to her own weapons, as well as potentially to the attacks of some of her teammates after the move has been carried out, specifically from within a synergy setting. But let's go ahead and transition to look over to a couple of the attacks that she has both in her base attack kit as well as her ability and synergy attack kit. So first and foremost, we need to note her basic attacks. And what you'll notice here is she has less hits in her base attack kit than a lot of the roster tends to have. She has 3 different hits. And the positive aspect of this is that even though there are less hits in the overall combo, they do make physical contact with your opponents, and they will kind of stagger them out of retaliating directly into you. And not all characters on this roster have that luxury. So it's not as strong as I would like it to see, but it is still beneficial for her sake and her demonstration here. The next thing that we need to note is her heavy attack, which is similar in its form to the heavy attack that we saw on Black Panther, where it is a sweeping upwards kick. And again, that has a very hefty hit to it that will knock opponents backwards and does a decent amount of damage, so it's not the worst thing in the world. It doesn't chain as easily or as efficiently at the end of a basic combo, mainly because her basic combo is pretty clunky in how it comes out and can't be expected to chain in with a heavy attack as well as some other characters, though you may be able to get away with it when confronting boss enemies or some of the mighty enemies that have that stagger bar that you're looking to deplete. Do not try and use that against any of the grunt enemies, as it's not going to chain in off of her main attacks or in her basic combo whatsoever. In terms of her versatility and how she moves around the battlefield, she is equipped with a somersault double jump, just like Black Panther is. So as I mentioned in his breakdown, she is decent at making her way through a couple of the environmental puzzles that you need to work out in the main campaign or story. In addition to having a double jump, she does have a very reliable falling aerial attack, where as soon as you hit that button, you will activate the attack and she will fall right down onto the ground and kind of give a concussive blow in a circular area once she comes down on the ground. So that is pretty nice as well. And in terms of her blocking and roll animations, as you're seeing here, she will cross her batons up in front of her and then kind of somersault or roll out of the way depending on the directional input that you have upon needing to roll away from an opponent's move. But we're now at the point where we can go ahead and talk a little bit more about her abilities and what synergy traits they have. Now, all of her abilities do have a synergy trait to them, which is very important to remember, because this is a beneficial thing to have on your team if you're looking to add a couple of damage output items that are pretty reliable across the board. So the first one, of course, is her Covering Fire, which is a projectile attack type and has the Rapid Fire synergy trait, which makes sense as the Covering Fire ability involves her repeatedly firing the 2 pistols that she has on either hip. And you can continue to use this ability by mashing the ability button once, or providing that you have enough energy points to spend on that ability. It's not great on the damage front. It's not very good in terms of how much energy points it consumes or uses, and you do not want to use this on opponents that have stagger gauges that you need to deplete, as it does very, very poorly on that front. But as you rank it up, it does get a little bit better. It reduces the energy point cost. It increases the damage that the attack does. It will increase the damage that does the stagger gauge, as well as, at its final iteration, reduces the chance of the attack being interrupted. But do keep in mind that the statistics that you are currently seeing on the screen are the statistics for those attacks at their maximum rank. So you're already seeing them at the best they can possibly be for this character. Moving along to her second ability, we find ourselves in line with the Widow's Kiss. And this will fire electricity from both of her wands or both batons. You can hold this attack instead of repeatedly mash the button in order to continue attacking. And upon releasing this attack, there will be a larger burst of electricity at the end of those batons there. So some benefit to using that, to be sure. This is one of her attacks that adds the shock ability attribute to the attacks, so you will notice that upon finishing this move, the batons do stay electrified for some time after finishing the attack. It has the energy attack type, has the shock synergy trait, and is a little bit better on the damage front, having a damage classification of B instead of C, though it is still in that C category in terms of the energy points consumed, and a little bit better on the stagger gauge with the classification of D. And as you rank up this attack, it will reduce the amount of energy points consumed to use the ability, as well as adding an element of shock to your own attacks and later adding them to your ally attacks before reaching its pinnacle of being reduced or having a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. The third ability which we need to touch on here is the Widowmaker ability, where Black Widow will throw multiple timed bombs out in front of her character, and these have about a 2-second detonation time frame before they do go off. Now, most of your NPCs that you will be fighting against in these circumstances will not really think to duck out of the way of those explosions, so it's not the end of the world if you misplace it a little bit, as you may even have opponents who just kind of wander in to where those bombs or those grenades are placed and will go off. The attack type, again, is in the energy category, though it has the explosive synergy trait rather than the shock synergy trait to it that we saw with the Widow's Kiss. It has about the same amount of damage as the Widow's Kiss with a little bit more of an effective range. It still consumes about the same amount of your energy points and deals a little bit more damage to stagger gauges, so this is a more reliable attack if you're needing to burst down some heftier or mighty opponents and boss characters. As you continue to rank this attack up, it will cost less in terms of its energy point consumption, increase the overall attack damage, increase the damage to the stagger gauge, as well as finally getting the attribute of reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Now, the Widow's Bite is the last ability which we have to talk about here. This involves Black Widow plunging her gauntlets into the ground and causing an electrical shockwave. Again, this does have the ability attribute shock to it, though unlike the Widow's Kiss, it does not have the ability to add shock to her own attacks after being consumed or to her teammates' attacks either, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it does kind of make sense given that it doesn't really use her batons or any of those other elements of her character. This still has the energy attack type associated to it, though the synergy trait is the slam, which makes sense as she rises up into the air and then plummets back down into the ground before unleashing that circular area of effect with that attack. It has probably the best stats out of all of her abilities in having a C tier damage, C tier EP use, and C tier stagger. And you're probably starting to notice at this point that there is a consistency with a lot of Black Widow's abilities in terms of they have their uses, but they are pretty costly to use. And that's really kind of what draws Black Widow back from being a top tier character within this game. Now, it's not to say she doesn't have her advantages. She does certainly have a lot of synergy potential that she can use and synergizes pretty well, not only in terms of additional benefits that we looked at the beginning of the video, but as well as those attacks being able to synergize with a wide selection or a wide variety of the overall cast. The Widow's Bite attack, it does have a reduced EP cost as you later rank it up, and then similar with some of the other attacks that we've seen, it increases the attack damage, increases damage done to the stagger gauge, and finally achieves the reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Now, the last thing that we need to touch on in terms of Black Widow's kit is her extreme attack, and her extreme attack, it comes out very, very quick. It reaches its full utility in about a 5-second span, and it kind of rolls in a lot of the attack types that you see used within her abilities, as you see her launch a bunch of those grenades and timed bombs out in a circle around her, involves some of the covering fire in more of an upwards trajectory, and finally finishing with a very similar, if not identical, animation with the Widow's Bite plunging down right into the very center of that attack. Now, when detonating her extreme ability, you do want to make sure that you are right on top of whoever you're trying to unleash it on, because it does not compensate for being on the opposite side of the map or being a little bit further away from the opponents you're trying to detonate this on top of. So my personal recommendation when using this specific attack is making sure that you have not only gotten closer to the opponents you're trying to detonate it on, but if there are any mighty enemies or boss enemies in that area, make sure that you have them staggered or at least close to staggered by the time you are unleashing this attack. So this brings us to the final ranking and placement of Black Widow. Now, I really wish that I could rank her higher because I think she's an awesome character, but in all intents and purposes of the game, the gameplay, her abilities, her attacks, taking everything into consideration, I'm gonna have to place her here in B tier, and that I feel is even a pretty generous ranking in regards to what her kit looks like, what she's capable of doing. She could potentially get bumped down to C tier at some point in the future, but for now, I'm going to go ahead and leave her in B tier. But let me know what you think. Do you agree with my ranking? Do you disagree? Would you have placed her higher, lower? And don't forget to let me know in the comments down below which characters you're excited to see, as we will be breaking down each and every character on the roster at their maximum potential to put them in this ranking and place them on this chart. So thanks again for your time, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.